The National Security Council met on Tuesday with a resolve to take necessary steps to ensure that the issues which led to the EndSARS protests are addressed to prevent a reoccurrence. Well, joining me now to speak on the EndSARS movement, the power the federal government has within the law to stop future protests and police reforms, is a member of the Police Service Commission, human rights activist and president Lawyers Alert, Rommy. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. Well, last week, President Muhammadu Buhari said he would not allow the repeat of the EndSARS protest, stating that the government will continue to dialogue and carry all stakeholders along in ensuring there is no repeat of that destruction that occurred in the aftermath of the EndSARS protest. This statement has garnered a lot of mixed reactions. Many have said it's a clear indication of a clampdown of our fundamental right to protest. In your assessment, give us a broader perspective on this issue, and if you may emphasize if the federal government is within its rights to stop future protests.
Right off the bat, I think we need to set some parameters in terms of what is on the law and what should be the law. Definitely, persons have the unfettered constitutional right to express their grievances through protest. And that is the law. And so that's a fundamental human right that should be respected. And at such times, what persons need to do often is to approach the police for a permit, not a permit, what I would even love to call some sort of information in saying, this is what we intend to do, this is how we're going to go, and the police are supposed to give some sort of protection to protesters in ensuring that they are safe, it doesn't go beyond the ambit of the law and all of that. But we still need to look at what the president was saying. And if we all cast our minds back to how the EndSARS protest was eventually hijacked and how public properties were destroyed, how persons lost their lives, how police officers were killed and all of that, my thinking is when the president says we will not allow that to happen, that is what he's saying. Because the fact that there is a right to protest does not give the right for us to go out there when hoodlums hijack and start to do the things that we saw happen. I think any responsible government will want to put an end to such things. And so for me, that is how I see it. But ordinarily, sure, yes, no government can block, stop, or hinder the unfettered right to protest. That would be unconstitutional, and that would be a violation of human rights. But in the same vein, it's also unconstitutional for protesters to go out there, destroy public properties, kill innocent police officers and other people, and other innocent citizens. So I think the president was referring to the latter part of the protest, which was hijacked. But ordinarily, the earlier part of the protest was beautiful. We love what we saw, the peaceful way that even citizens and police officers were relating. I saw footages and pictures of protesters even sharing water and drinks with police officers in the early part. But how hoodlums hijacked and where it went down to, no responsible government will accept that. And I think that is what the president meant when he said it won't happen again.
I like that you mentioned all right, I like that you mentioned what you just said. It's very essential because while some people see this, like you said, as the president responding to people's needs, and obviously, maybe this could even be a follow-up to the 5 for 5. Some people also see this as, how do you just stop something like this? This doesn't happen in a democratic regime. But I want you to also look at what he said from the perspective of the sequence of events that happened. Now, during the protest, a lot of the officers that were accused of police brutality, we still await to see how justice is going to be meted out to a lot of them. However, there's been a huge clampdown on the EndSARS protesters, from seizing of passports to freezing of accounts to the release just recently of arrests. So I'd like you to look at what he's saying from that perspective and tell me if you still have the same opinion. We're going to head out to a quick break. When we get back to the show, I'd like you to take a look at that question. Stay with us on the morning show. We still have Mr. Rommy political strategist and lawyer. And we have been talking about a lot of the things that have, or rather opinions, that have followed up from the president's statement, which, by the way, a lot of people have taken in two ways. You know, some people agree with you as, yeah, he is just saying that, listen, the aftermath of the EndSARS protest was not anything anyone would wish for. However, you know, this is something that we cannot let happen again. While some people see it as, oh, no more protests, clamp down. So like I said before that break, analyze this based on the sequence of events that have happened to the protesters and to the people that led the protest, that's the members of the police unit SARS. From that perspective, I'd like to get your thoughts.
Yeah, we need to understand, again, the perceptions. We need to understand the state of affairs between citizens and government just before the protest and also after the protest. Undoubtedly, there's no trust. Trust has been completely missing between government and the people, especially regarding security and policing. We are all aware that before the EndSARS protest, there had been an investigation, reports were out there, and for 2 years this was not implemented, and several other issues. So much so that even when government came out to say, we're disbanding SARS, we're doing this and that, citizens did not really believe. And so we need to understand that that state is there, and government also needs to, in the spirit of governance, understand this. And we need to manage this relationship towards healing and all of that. And so a lot of things that has happened prior and after the protest, unfortunately, I think government took some steps that were probably not, should have not been taken at the time they were. For example, I give two examples. First, we said we are disbanding SARS. And then we immediately set up what we call SWAT, which many persons felt like was changing the apparel. It was the difference between 6 and half a dozen. And so that state continued. Again, we were talking about coming together, healing, understanding the youth and all of that. And then you begin to freeze accounts, again, of these same persons while conversations are on. So when you look at these things happening, it is very easy for, even when the president or any government official, for example, speaks, you are looking at those hidden messages, whether real or perceived. And so I think, in my opinion, the thinking that this means a blanket, a blanket cancellation, so to speak, of future protest, even if that is not what the president meant, actions carried before and after could give that impression. But I wouldn't think so. It's in our laws, it's constitutional, that people have a right to protest. It's a human right. And that is why the law has also given procedures for that. The law, so this is my opinion, that the issue is trust, first and foremost, and secondly, no one can say nobody should protest, not government, not anybody. But we know that as with everything, there are parameters, there are rules. I still will think personally that the issue of saying we will not allow what happened during SARS happen meant we're not going to allow what we saw at the end of it all. It's tragic. Nobody wants that for their country, for persons to be killed, probably properties being burnt and all of that. I mean, come on. I would think that any president will say that. But again, the trust we're talking about will mean that statements that are not clearly spelled out and just made that way, then people again might be excused and justified in thinking of the worst, given the lack of trust and the relationship between government and its citizens with regard to security issues in the country.
Let me come in here. You are right. Or as a citizen of a democratic nation like Nigeria, protest is our constitutional right. Well, you know that the police have come out to say that they would not permit any form of demonstration. Only last week, the Lagos State Police Commissioner, Akim Odumusu, sent a detachment of police officers to seal off the premises of the Africa Shrine in an attempt to stop an EndSARS meeting from holding. I'd like your reaction to that, because we often see that the Nigerian police is adopting this scare tactic when it comes to issues like this.
Yeah, and so I would think that when persons are meeting to have, at African Shrine or whatever, to have a meeting, it's their right to have such meetings. And if a police commissioner or any person for that matter stops that meeting, it will be wrong. And the courts are there for us to approach the courts and see the constitutionality of these actions or not. But on the face of it, I would say that is improper, that is wrong. People have a right to meet. For the purposes of those meetings and what happens thereafter, I guess is what we should be looking at. But that this organization is meeting or these persons are meeting, it's their right to meet. And I don't see, we should just manage relationships going forward for me within the law, and the law permits this. We are a nation of laws, as the president has said. We're a nation where we're governed by the Constitution and ancillary laws. And our laws permit that, and we cannot derogate from those laws without a very good reason to. For every right, for every law, there are exceptions. And once these things don't fall under those exceptions, as a meeting as African Shrine is for me, I think it should have been allowed, and it should be wrong to have stopped that meeting.
All right. Now, I like that you mentioned exceptions. While Section 40 looks at, the right to assemble, freedom, to just put together such meetings that Seun Kuti, who was actually the convener of that meeting, was trying to do. Section 45 also looks at the fact that it is right to restrict such meetings in the interest, let me read that specifically, such rights should be restricted in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, public morality, or public health, or, of course, to protect the rights and freedom of others. Now, is this the part of the Constitution that could be at play towards that ban? And if that's what it is it possible that what we've seen with the EndSARS protest, or with any meeting that surrounds the EndSARS protest, has gotten to the point where the government now looks at it as, if you're convening for this, it is officially a threat to the society. It is a threat to the defense of the society. Is that what this has become?
I want to be very cautious here, but I will say this. Personally, I feel uncomfortable when I see persons gathering in these days of COVID-19, ordinarily.
But they've been doing that.
Again, you want to talk about...
I mean, political and individuals, they've been doing that. We've seen rallies, political rallies, we've seen the protests, it's been happening.
Exactly. I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
They've been doing that. And so when you talk about exceptions, I'm trying to factor in that into one of the exceptions. But I would think that the EndSARS meeting that was stopped could not have been because of COVID-19, because, like you said, it's been happening. I would just think that what reason was given for the stopping of that meeting at African Shrine? Did it fall under any of the exceptions? And if it did, then we need to, if the conveners feel it did not fall under that, they have a right to approach the court for, adjudication. But here's the thing again. Look, we need to understand this. This is all about trust, confidence, and governance. We need to rebuild this. And this is why we need to handle these issues with a little bit of caution, with a little bit of, I have been at meetings where persons of the SSS come into those meetings and say, look, we want to sit with you in this meeting and ensure that it doesn't fall under any of the exceptions. And sometimes they have the right to do that. But to say the meeting shouldn't happen at all without giving reasons that fall under the subsection, under the exceptions as given by the law would be wrong. But again, we're not talking law here strictly.
Yes, I like what you just said. Because if we think about it, yeah, and we want to think of a basis for this, it's a very straightforward thing. They said that this should not happen. And if we've looked at the aftermath of the EndSARS protest, it's very straightforward. Has this EndSARS movement gotten to a point where it's seemingly unsafe? Because if we're looking at exceptions and we're looking at it, because if anything outside the law is just based on our own personal opinions, which really doesn't hold much water. But if you're going to do anything, it has to be something that you can legally back up. So I just want to get your reaction on this. Has this movement gotten to a point where the government is starting to feel like it's become unsafe for people to gather, so we can get a better understanding of why they felt like it's okay to do this? Otherwise, it's just another thing of, oh, we can because we're the government and there's nothing you can do about it, even if it's illegal. But is there a legal basis for this at all?
Yeah, sure. So let us do a quick post-mortem.
Okay.
A 1 minute post-mortem of how EndSARS started and how it went. So this protest started, and persons were on the streets, persons were having fun, protesting against police brutality, especially against EndSARS. They came out with a 5-point demand, which to the credit of the government, whether sincere or not, but the government came and said, we're acceding to all of these requests. We're disbanding. We're disbanding SARS, we're setting up commissions on query, we're giving compensation and blah, blah.
You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News, and we still have Mr. Rommy Nam, a political strategist and lawyer. In 1 minute, Mr. Rommy Nam, I need you to just wrap this up for me, the security of the EndSARS movement right now, and how this decision to ban the event at the Africa Shrine reflects that.
Yes, I said here that it is undisputable that the end product of the protests that start is not what we wish for our country. And it's very proper, in my opinion, for the authorities to be cautious in saying that we don't want that to happen again. And how I would love to see leaders emerge from EndSARS, people representing the movement that could speak, could hold conversations. Communications need to start. And for me, I think on both sides, I see government being very careful because of the end product of what has happened. Even as we must admit that citizens have a right to protest, managing these situations is key. Saying, look, we don't trust government, so we're going to be on the street endlessly and allow other factors and enemies come in and hijack these issues are the worry of government. I would like to think so. As a civil society activist, I would say this, that we have a right to protest. But again, when the state panels were set up, I think it was strategic for us to have retreated, taking advantage of these vents and ventilate our thinking and watch what will happen. Suspend these issues. This is what some part of the movement were saying, that let us suspend and approach the panels and all of that. Probably if we had done that, would we have seen people killed, innocent persons? Would we have come to a situation where public properties were burnt and all of that? And we must factor this whenever we decide to move forward in terms of action, both from government and citizens. That is key. We have a country to still live in. We have a country to still, aspire to be what we want to be. So ours is not the destruction of the country. It's about lifting the country up to do the right thing. And it's about engagement and communication. That was what was missing in the EndSARS protest. There were no structured means of communication, whether back end or direct with government. And I think lessons need to be learned. How do we begin to communicate? When I say communication, I don't mean information dissemination. I mean a feedback mechanism and all of that, which I will always say for me, in the security apparatus of this country, with regard to civilian policing and everything, that is where the Police Service Commission comes in. And I'm happy that post the EndSARS, the Police Service Commission is beginning to, come into its own in terms of visibility that it should have had, that we are not, using. It's beginning to come into its own in terms of this is where citizens and government meet in terms of security. Look at the composition of the Police Service Commission. It is represented by the organized private sector. There, you have women groups, you have the NGOs, you have media, you have the police themselves, you have the judiciary. These are all citizens' representative groups. It was not given its pride of place in the terms of security, civilian policing, and all of that. And so when these issues broke up, we didn't even have anybody to speak to. There was not that feedback mechanism. The office of the IGP, through the PRO, was doing all it could. But that is an information dissemination organ. It's not communication. Communication presupposes there is a feedback thing. And that is where the Police Service Commission would have been used. But over the years, in terms of accountability mechanisms of civilians of police to civilians through the Police Service Commission, we ignored the Police Service Commission in the main. It was not capacitated, it was not resourced, and this was why this all came to be. I believe the whole EndSARS protest and civilian policing heating up and would have been notches down in terms of tolerance if we use the Police Service Commission. And going forward, I would say the Police Service Commission, being the citizens' bridge between government and the people, being the bridge between government and the people, should be used much more in, liaising with citizens with regard to policing the civic space and civilian policing.
Yes, now, what is your reaction to the scheduled meeting for November 23rd by members of the UK Parliament, to debate the sanctions against the Buhari administration over its handling of the EndSARS protest? And looking at it, in the case of national sovereignty, what effect can the UK's judgment on the government's handling of the protest hold on our nation?
So there is a big misconception here. If you look at the global human rights sanctions that came into effect in July 2020 by the UK government, it targets entities and individuals, not necessarily governments. So when we say against the Buhari administration, it's a misnomer. What they are talking about and what is being debated is who are the individuals that were involved in these human rights violations? Who are the entities, the companies and all of that? We need to find out who they are and punish and sanction them directly. Do they have companies abroad that we can clamp on? For example, in the UK or in the EU, can we stop them from traveling? Can we do so? You see, sanctions have moved from saying, let's sanction a nation where everybody suffers, to isolating and pinpointing those entities, companies, individuals, government officials that are involved and personally, surgically go after them. That is what the global human rights sanctions regime that came into effect in July this year, I think, talks about. And it's not about the government as a whole. That is the first tranche, and that is what is being debated on the 23rd of November in the UK Parliament. It's not against the Nigerian state. It's about isolating whether those police officers, whether those army officers, whether those federal government officers in their personal capacity, isolating them and, sanctioning them appropriately if it can be identified and proven that, yes, they violated human rights, they contributed in what happened and all of that. Talking about sanctioning the government as a whole, that is way down the line. On 23rd, that is not what is on the table.
All right, so basically what you're saying is what we're looking at is a possible sanction of individuals as opposed to the government in itself. All right, now let's talk about the civil society groups that you mentioned. Now, they facilitate communication between citizens and policymakers. However, their advocacy is only as effective as the space allowed within the government. Knowing this, how much influence can civil societies have in enabling some of the police reforms that we are looking at? That has been a major conversation. That was also one of the themes on the list, the EndSARS demand list. That's the 5 for 5 reforming of the police. How much influence can civil societies have on this, seeing as usually they are that intermediary between the policymakers and, of course, the people?
Wonderful question, in my opinion. And this is where I think as civil society groups, we need to look beyond some issues we think are wins for us. Presently, we see, we have contributed in the passage of this policy, in the passage of that law as wins, and hooray, we are there. It's just the beginning. It should be about activating and implementing those laws. I sincerely do think that with the framework that we have now, if we focus more on activation of laws and its implementation, then we would have probably gone some miles and notches ahead in solving some of the issues that we have now. There are civil society experts who have also been brought into government. We have points of pressures here and there. How are we utilizing them? We need to move away a bit from activities to impact. That is critical. I'm not saying we are not doing enough as civil society activists and groups or in government or outside of government. We are, but we need to re-strategize. And this, for me, is the issue. And so this question is a question for me that civil society groups and actors, we need to sit and reflect on. We need to reflect on. Government sometimes opens the spaces for us. I just talked about the Police Service Commission. And if you look at other agencies too, there are civil society representatives on them here and there. How are we interacting with these points of pressure that we have within government and all of that? Undoubtedly, the civic space can be better. It can be enhanced. We look at the social media bill, we see how groups where we're talking about regulating NGOs, we're talking about all of this. All this tightens the civic space and makes it difficult. But what are our own representatives in government doing? Have we called them for a meeting? Have we sat with them? Have we tried to expand within the resources that we have within and outside? For now, what we do, what is main in the civil society sector is that we believe in laws, we believe in frameworks, we believe in fantastic.
Great.
But the question is always, so what?
All right.
We need to ask the so what question.
Okay.
And that is where we should be focusing on.
Let me come in here. I'd like your assessment on the use of live ammunition on unarmed civilians. On Thursday, security detail attached to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, killed an unarmed newspaper vendor while shooting in the air. Then, on the Lekki shootings as well, CNN came out with a damning report indicating live bullets were used on unarmed protesters. Isn't there a law to prevent this type of careless behavior we see our security operatives displaying? This careless act has caused a lot of lives, loss of a lot of lives of many Nigerians.
And so it's a very, very regrettable thing. It's something that should be condemned even by government and non-government of officials. When COVID-19 started, in the first month of it, more Nigerians were killed by security agencies than COVID-19 itself. Yes. So it's not funny, and we need to ask the questions why. It is unheard of and it's unhealthy to move with live ammunition when persons are protesting and all they got are their bare hands. It's wrong. I don't think that is within the rules of engagement. At the National Assembly the other day when the IG was making his presentations, he was talking about equipping the police to be able to engage protesters when issues hit up outside of live bullets and all of that. I mean, giving them equipment like water hoses and all of that, water pumps and so we need to move away from this. I think it's wrong to go in with live ammunition. It doesn't take much to see that. And what happened with the speaker and the overzealous security agencies is also regrettable, which calls to question for me. It's not about the incident often, is also finding out why. Why are our security agencies quick to whip out guns against defenseless citizens? Is it about the training? And when they whip it out, why is it always fatal? What about people's limbs, legs? If you must do it, and so for me, going straight for the kill is something that is abominable. And I think we need to look at it carefully. Is it about the training? Is it about the recruitment? We need to carry out a scientific and comprehensive analysis of why this happens and try to address them. Human rights are most important. The right to life is cardinal. It's sacred. Once you take it, you can't bring it back again. And so the way citizens are being cut down in their prime by bullets that are meant to protect them is something that is cause for concern. And I'm sure the authorities are also looking into it. Nobody goes out to kill the citizens. And I think the action of the speaker also spoke volumes in terms of how he reacted in trying to, within the human efforts of saying, look, I regret this shouldn't have happened, this person is undergoing disciplinary actions as of now, reaching out to the loved ones and all of that. It shows some sort of remorse, and it shows that this is not a state policy. It's about security personnel, for me, at the lower rung, not being trained properly. And so it calls to question the issue of also training and all of that.
Of course, it's essential, the remorse, but the fact is, like you said, situations like this shouldn't happen. Rommy, thank you for joining us on the morning show today.